Welcome back, Peter.
Good to be back.
Usual intro. Um, yeah, I think this is podcast episode number 29. Yeah, 29. And the book is The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, I think is how you say it. Yeah. So we'll do the usual. I'll give the summary and then we can chat a bit and then we'll dig into it. Cool. So The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy is a classic type of self-help book, being a mixture of motivational stories and a collection of Darren's techniques for achieving consistent success in work and life. The focus of the book is on how, if you apply his tips and techniques, you can achieve consistent progress, which will compound and end up in orders of magnitude better results. As he writes, nothing works like the power of the compound effect of simple actions done right over time. That's it. Yeah, that is the book summary. I don't know if you have any additional things to add there or some thoughts and that.
Not much. I think it's one of the most, I think, practical and relatable books we've read to date. I mean, just my opinion. I think most of them are, but I think there were so many. I want to use the word tangible points from it, but yeah, like things that you can implement into your life. And I mean, again, it's probably like in parallel with Atomic Habits. I think it was just the framing of it was a little different. I think Atomic Habits is on a wider scale, but I think this was kind of more narrow, like this is what we're trying to achieve, let's run with it type of thing. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know where you came across him, Darren Hardy?
No, so a friend of mine was talking about the book. It was
Okay.
funny enough. It was an interesting conversation we're having. I think we're in that era where we're talking about trying to find partners and trying to get married and stuff. And
Okay.
he was then talking about, I don't know if you recall, but there's a part that he talks about all the points, sort of like the 40 plus points he wrote down of
Yes.
the
Yeah.
wife he
Yeah.
wants. But then the flip side was like, he then had to ask himself, is he the type of man that sort of woman wants, type
Yeah.
of thing. So yeah, me and him, the friend of mine, we're having a discussion about that. So yeah, I was like making fun of him about like, so okay, these are the women you want, and do you think, so it's like, so yeah, he was just saying, yeah, I need to work on this. Yeah, it was a very interesting conversation. So yeah, from that I was like, actually, let me actually
Pick the book
try
up.
out this book and stuff. And yeah, I looked it up, and then yeah, that's where the suggestion came from.
Yeah, I think it's a dangerous thing to do what he did, because I
Yeah.
was expecting him, to be honest, the Darren, to like talk about those points and then be um, like you shouldn't sort of go that I don't know how to explain it, but like to put all the things in that detail and expect exactly that thing. I think you're kind of setting yourself up for
Failure.
disappointment. Not because like the person you marry is bad or anything like that, but just because like it's just too
Unrealistic
you almost
expectations.
yeah, I mean, it's almost not even unrealistic. It's like you constraining them to be this
Oh, okay.
person. You're not letting them just be a person. You like, if they don't match up to one of those things, then like, oh, they were close. But I know that he wouldn't be like that, and I think I think his point is very valid. Like his
Yeah,
idea of
yeah.
saying like, okay, like you want these things, like, but like what are you doing about yourself to try and make yourself a better person, or essentially. I think that's a really great point.
Good point.
Like,
Yes.
yeah. I think
We
the
agree on
other
that.
side of
We
it,
agree on that, yeah.
yeah, the other side of it, I'm a little bit hesitant to be like, yeah, that makes sense. List out all the things you want, and then if you don't get that, be disappointed. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. I think even in our discussion, like the friend and myself, it was kind of on the point, like, yeah, it's not like also listing down, but also like just sort of more of like a self-reflection to be like, am I
Yeah.
a guy that attracts that? I don't want to use caliber of women, but yeah, those type of, I don't
Yeah.
know what they're, but yes.
Yeah, but I get the sentiment, yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, essentially that's where the conversation came,
Yeah.
or the book came from. It was from
Yeah, I
that
think that's
conversation.
a helpful idea. I will maybe just in the vein of caveats and things like that, I will just give one or two caveats that I think like are helpful for this kind of a book. If you so the one caveat is if you've read like a lot of self-help type books, I think that this book can be still helpful because it covers a lot of helpful ideas and concepts and things, but you probably won't come across anything new in it. I think it's more like he not reuses, but he uses a lot of like sort of standard analogies. Also has a lot of his own, but uses things like the 1% flight being off and that derailing you for a long time, or in the distance it derails you. The idea of like inertia, the physics thing, and then momentum and like oak trees and all of the kind of classic ones doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's actually, I think, a helpful thing. Especially, I found it right at the end of the book. He says, like, if you ever get into a slump, essentially, like, revisit this book. And I think I found that I found it helpful. It's almost like a summary of the general self-help advice, not in a bad way, in a very helpful way. Yeah, but
I think
that's
to your point, I think it's a reinforcement of what we already know to a degree. I mean,
yeah,
I think we did a book recently. I forgot which book it was, but it was kind of telling one thing it mentioned was like a summation of the 5 people you hang around with. And I mean, that concept is also brought forth here and kind of discussed. But then it's taken a step further to be like, how do you... I think with that, it just sort of mentioned that to be like, watch out for this. But this was like, okay. But then if you've got certain aspirations, you want certain things about your life, actually go out and seek people that are doing well in those spaces and actually make them part of your circle, you know. So yes, I do agree with you. It's like a repetition of, but then there's just like, again, something to say like that extra thing. You know, the goal is winning, but you need to work extra harder just to stand out from the rest. You know, I feel like the book is that. It's like it is presenting things that you already know, like you said, things that are in any other soft book, but then it just adds a little more to what you already know, which again, like you said, is not a bad thing. Yes, you might say, oh, I know this already, whatnot, but it's like in most cases it's like something is known, but you actually don't use it in that context. If you think of compound effect, the one thing that comes to your mind is investments, not, not, it's still investment in yourself, but it's never investing in yourself. It's more like actual monetary investments that you make. But sorry.
Yeah, and I think even from the Eric Fromm book, The Art of Loving, I think he touches on that idea of like there's the theory part of it and the actual like ingraining it into who you are. And that's those are two different things. Like you don't want the surgeon to just have the theoretical knowledge. You want them to actually have the practical knowledge. And I think this book kind of helps push someone towards that practical side of being like, okay, like these are the right things to do. We kind of know that, but like let's actually start putting them into practice, which is helpful. And then one last caveat, and then I'm done. I won't have any more caveats. The other caveat is just that he does, in the book, market a lot of his own stuff. He does seem to have a lot of helpful resources, which is great. But I feel like maybe, Darren, if you want to, one tip, maybe cut that down a tiny bit. I understand that it's part of his business that he has stuff to sell and stuff, but that was a little bit much. But yeah, that doesn't mean that the resources that he has aren't helpful in that. I don't actually know. I haven't really visited many of them. I watched one of his talks, but
yeah. It was like it was like reading a book with commercials essentially, but his own commercials. Does it like one at the end of every chapter or something that's kind of slipped there in between? But yeah.
It's just I don't know how many .coms he has in this book, but it's quite a lot. But cool. I don't know if there's any last thoughts from your side before we dig in.
No, I think we can.
Cool.
We can dive in.
Okay, so then there's an opening chapter that's written by Tony Robbins, and I just wanted to touch on one small point from there, which is he says here, success isn't about doing 5,000 different things well. Success is doing the right things well 5,000 times over. I think it's a very helpful concept. And then he says here also in the introduction, remember, success is simple. Do the right things and keep doing them day in and day out. I know that you'll experience the best life has to offer. That's the little motivational piece there. I think it's straightforward, and I think it's a helpful thing to keep in mind. I often have tons of different random ideas like, oh, I should do this and do that and stuff, but it's not. If I was to instead choose one or two of those things and take actual steps towards doing them or implementing them or whatever it might be, that's a lot, most likely a lot better to consistently do that than to just be switching between 5,000 different things, as he puts it. Yeah. Thoughts from your side?
No, I think, as you said, most of that was self-explanatory. No, nothing to add.
Cool. Okay, then I'm going to jump through the introduction. So he says here, there's no magic bullet, secret formula, or quick fix to success. You don't make $200,000 a year by spending 2 hours a day on the internet or lose 30 pounds in a week with a Hollywood diet. A little bit further down, he says, we are constantly bombarded with increasingly sensational claims to get rich, get fit, get younger. These repetitive marketing messages have distorted our sense of what it really takes to succeed. And then a bit further, he says, I wrote this book to take you back to basics. My personal experience has proven no matter what you learn or what strategy you employ, success comes as a result of the compound effect. And then lastly, on the introduction, he says, before we dig in, I have one warning. Earning success is hard. The process is laborious, tedious, and sometimes even boring. The bottom line is that you already know what you need to do to succeed. You don't need to learn anything more. If all we needed was more information, everyone with an internet connection would have a mansion. It's time to create new behaviors and habits oriented away from sabotage and towards success. It's that simple. Yeah. I think largely... Oh, sorry. Go for it, Peter.
No, I was going to say, interesting enough, that what you read there is exactly what we kind of started off with, to be like, there's nothing new in this book. That's essentially what he said. It's not like he's coming up with anything new, or he's here to tell you anything new or point you in a direction to get. It's like these are already things It's just how do we best use them to kind of
Yeah.
capitalize on success.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just because they aren't new to most people doesn't actually mean that, like, or I say most people, I'd say most people who are familiar with self-help things, if you haven't like read a general self-help book, I think a lot of the things that he mentions in that are actually extremely, extremely useful, because they help give you a perspective on things, which I think is correct. Like if we just take the plane being 1 degree off and then it ends up extremely far away from its target just by that small difference compounded over time. Like those kind of ideas and concepts, if you haven't come across them before, they really are helpful. And as far as I can tell, they generally are true. It's obviously there's lots of nuance and things to it, but I think they're good ideas to sort of be like, oh, okay, yeah. If I go down this path, things can end up in that way. If I go down this path, things can end up in that way.
I was gonna say, like, I mean, it's not even about restricting it to self-help books. I'm sure in one's life they've been to an event where someone's telling a speech and someone is going to speak about success. I mean, through school, I think primary, high school, and everything, you go through those talks like the Founders Day or prize giving and whatnot, and there will always be a speech on how to be successful, and things that are laid out in this book are topics that you've probably have heard in a speech or two,
Yeah. No, that's fair. All right, should we dig into the first chapter?
Yeah.
So, there's 6 main chapters. I'll read through the titles of them and then we can hop into them. The first one is the compound effect in action. The second one is choices. The third is habits. The fourth is momentum. The fifth is influences. And the sixth is acceleration. The compound effect in action, chapter 1. So he starts off talking about his dad, and on page 2, he says, yeah, dad was the original no excuses guy. And then he talks about how that helped him over time he would see his dad getting up and training in the mornings, and that would help him to instill discipline or have discipline in that. So he starts off with that. And then on page 5, he says here, we've been hypnotized by commercial marketing, which convinces you of problems you don't have and sells you on the idea of instant fixes to cure them. We've also been socialized to believe in the fairy tale endings found in movies and novels, and we've lost sight of good old-fashioned the value of old-fashioned hard work and consistent work. Yeah, so I think he's kind of reflected on his dad, and then he says, hard work and consistent effort is a valuable thing, and we should try and aim for that rather than just having this peaceful, relaxed life. Then carrying on page 5, there's a title that says, you haven't experienced the payoff of the compound effect. So he starts digging into just the different aspects of the compound effect and how different people haven't and have experienced it. So I'll read a few more snippets. So on page 5, he says, what's most interesting about this process to me is that even though the results are massive, the steps in the moment don't feel significant. Most people get tripped up by the simplicity of the compound effect. For instance, they quit after the 8th day of running because they're still overweight. And then on the next page 6, he says, small, seemingly insignificant steps completed consistently over time will create a radical difference. Let me give you a few detailed examples. Then he gives 2 examples. The one is another sort of classic example in investing and things. He calls it the magic penny. And essentially the summary is, given a choice between $3 million up front versus I think it's cent or $1, I can't remember, but it doesn't really matter, compounded or doubled every day. So today it's 1, tomorrow it's 2, then the next day 2 doubled is 4, 4 doubled is 8, etc. And basically the point is that in the beginning, it's a penny. In the beginning, it's worth basically nothing, and it takes a while to end up being like, okay, it's still not worth anything, and then sort of towards the end, that exponential doubling just pushes the value way, way up, and then by the end of the month, the person who took the 3 million would end up with 3 million, and the person who said no, I'll have the compounded penny, the penny that doubles every day, that is worth 10 million, basically, is the summary.
I was going to say maybe even less than 3 million, because at that point they would have started digging into it.
Yeah, that's true as well, yeah. Close to 0. And then he gives, what I really liked is, it's a very simple overview of 3 different friends. And so this is his second example, and I'll just glance through it. So the first friend number 1, let's call him Larry, plods along doing what he's always done. So the same as what he's done before. Friend number 2, Scott, starts to make some small, seemingly inconsequential positive changes. He begins by reading 10 pages of a book per day. Scott wants to see change in his life, but he doesn't want to make a fuss over it, so he doesn't do drastic things. Then on the next page he says, Scott is determined to stick with these choices, knowing that even though they're simple, he could easily be tempted to abandon them. And then thirdly is the friend Brad, who makes poor choices. He recently bought a new big screen TV. He's been trying out recipes, and the cheesy casseroles and desserts are his favorite. He installed the bar in his family living room, and Brad just wants to have a little bit more fun and relax a little bit more during the week. At the end of 5 months, there's no perceivable difference between Larry, Scott, and Brad. Remember the compounding coin idea. So early on, there's not really much of a difference. At the end of 10 months, we still can't see noticeable changes in any of their lives. It's not until we get to the end of the 18th month that the slightest of differences are measurable in these 3 friends' appearances. But by about the 25th month, we start to see really measurable differences. And then he carries on a little bit later and says, but the differences are more significant than just weight. Scott has invested almost 1,000 hours reading good books and listening to self-improvement audios. By putting his new gained knowledge into practice, he's earned a promotion and a raise. Best of all, his marriage is thriving. And then he says that's the power of the compound effect. So I think those are extremely helpful examples, because it kind of embeds that idea of saying like, okay, you can take these different trajectories. The one trajectory can be like, okay, don't really do much differently, carry on as is, and then that's sort of fine. It's not good or bad, it's just fine. Or you can do slightly negative things, like there's not anything wrong with having an extra drink or relaxing and doing those kind of things, but the compounding of, okay, now you have because we won't, or I'm not going to run through it, but like he gives in the next section, he gives a example of the ripple effect of the the guy who chose to put the TV in place and the bar, and he basically says like, it's a bit of a dramatic example, but he essentially says like his marriage ends up being on the rocks because all of those little things compounded to him being more tired, and compounded to him being more moody, and all of these different negative outcomes play out. And it sort of doesn't seem like he did anything drastically wrong. But if we look at it carefully, then Darren's basically saying like, it's because of these small little negative habits that the plane went on off course. And then opposite with the good things, the small good habits compounded led to that positive change.
I mean, in terms of the ripple effects, like, I mean, I remember when I was reading, that section and most of the book, it's like I was thinking of how like I was poor the fittest I've ever been in my life, like around 2022, and again, it's so easy to sort of backslide. And I mean, to me going back to some sort of consistent routine in March this year, it was like everything had been undone, So and again, it's like after 2022, like it just dropped up until when I moved here. It was like, I mean, that excuse of I need to find a gym, and like 8 months later, I still haven't found a gym, And then when I eventually did, it's like, it's so interesting how like all the work you sort of put in kind of can just disappear in a snap. And again, it's like that one choice, because I mean, can't pinpoint it, but somewhere the choice was made. I mean, we always blame it on being lazy or anything, but it was a choice being made to sort of, slack off, And I think reading that now is also sort of reassuring to be like, okay, now like 4 months into me sort of getting back, it's like, looking at how much weight I've lost, how much fit I actually am and everything. Is like, yes, again, like we said, it's not things we don't know. It's just things that we actually just don't put into practice, And I mean, same like you said, like the 1 degree at departure will result in like 100 miles difference when you kind of get to the destination, So those 3 friends might have been in the same exact boat, at a certain point, but their choices led them in, 3 different, situations where one decided to better themselves, one was just like content with where they're at, and one kind of regressed, and when you look at such stuff, 5 years later, you wake up and you ask yourself, how did I get here? But when you introspect, you'll be like, you can pinpoint it where it actually went wrong. But I think as human beings, we don't want to take that accountability, unfortunately.
It's, and I mean, like, things can go wrong and out of your control and that. But, and this book leans towards the you are basically 100% in control. He obviously, I would assume he obviously doesn't actually think that, but I would imagine he would say it's a good mentality to have, because if you think that you're like, I tried, but you didn't actually really try, you just sort of did a little bit, then you're leaving things to deteriorate when they didn't actually need to. But,
I want to say something, James. I know
Go for it.
It will be slightly controversial to what you just said now, but
That's fine.
Like your point,
This is a discussion, Peter.
It is a discussion.
I'll edit it out if I disagree. No, I'm joking.
No, I was just trying to say it's a good point, but I don't think it's not a terrible thing to think that you're actually in control of everything, and I'll tell you why.
To think you are.
To think you're in control of everything.
Carry on.
And I'll tell you why. Because yes, there might be some situation, and I mean, this is also coming from another book we've read to be like, we also actually in control on how we react to things. So yes, we might not be in control of how our life flows, but at the point at which something deviates, like again, like something unexpected comes, it's still up to us to react a certain way to it. Because I think that's essentially what drives our lives. It's a constant getting to different junctions in life, and like whatever choice we make there. So essentially, I think we look in control of life as actually drawing a blueprint in life, but being in control of life doesn't have to look like that. I think so often you want it to be mapped up. This falls there, this falls there, this falls there. But I think to me, when you talk about being control in our life, it's like we're in control with how we react to things. As much even yes, there might be external influences where someone does something that's beyond your control. Again, using this word, but it's up to you to react to that. If you don't react the best way to that, which is what you have, all that you have in control of, is our reactions to things. It's either we react negatively and positive, and those are what straight. So essentially, even if you do the worst thing, you are in control of your life. You are in control of, taking the wrong direction. You're still in control. You can't say just because you've ended up in a place where you didn't want that you were never in control to end up there. You actually were in control because you made the decisions that led you to that point. But anyway, that was just
Yeah.
a
So
little
I
rant.
think the main thing is that I generally agree with what you've said. It's
Yeah.
just that in the back of my mind, I have the like caveats of, which I know can be annoying, but the caveats of like if you've been, there's the examples of the guy who gets, I think it's like a pole goes through his
Yeah.
head and things like that. And then his personality completely changes. And so I think that there's things in biology and within humans are very complex things that are outside of our control, and it can make us react in ways that we wouldn't have specifically chosen to, but because of our brain chemistry or because of some injury or something like that, that's like not actually in our control. And so there's like the small thing of like someone listening that might have some sort of major issue, and then you're like, it's your fault, essentially, I think is incorrect. I know that that's not what you're saying, but I think that that's the caveat I have in my mind. That's why I say like to approach things with the mindset that like I am in control of this and the decisions that I make matter, I think is the most important part, and it's an important attitude to have, even though you're not technically in 100% control. I think to act as if you are and do the best that you can, I think is very important.
Yeah,
Obviously,
I mean,
not in an
I'm
arrogant
not
way.
ignorant of the fact that there can be a freak accident, which you've done anything right up until that point, and that's also absolutely fair.
But yeah, the general principle I think is good. Okay, the last two pieces of the compound effect in action, so chapter 1, is, he says on page 15, real and lasting success requires work and lots of it. And then on that's page 15. Then page 16, he says, promise yourself, or he has the title of the microwave mentality, and basically we shouldn't have this mentality. And he says, promise yourself that you're going to let go for once and for all of your lottery winner expectations, because let's face it, you only hear stories about one winner, not the millions of losers. And then at the bottom of that page, by the end of this book, or even before, I want you to know in your bones that your only path to success is through a continuum of mundane, unsexy, unexciting, and sometimes difficult daily disciplines compounded over time. Yeah. I think it's another just helpful thing to you might be the one who wins the lottery, and then hopefully you're not one of the people who ends up basically blowing it and being worse off for it. But you might win the lottery, but the practical reality is that for most people, it actually, if you're successful, you would have had to put in a lot of hard work. It's a bit of luck along the way, but we'll talk about luck a little bit later in the book. And yeah, it takes discipline and effort, and that also makes it more rewarding if you do succeed, because you're like, I put in effort and I tried really hard and it paid off. That's great. Yeah. Any last thoughts there before we go on to chapter 2?
No, I think we've kind of discussed quite a lot as you went along. So yeah. Nothing to add.
Cool. Okay, chapter 2. So reminder, the title is Choices. So we'll start on page 19 and I'll jump through again. So he says here, the life we end up with is simply an accumulation of all the choices that we make. And then a bit further down, don't choose at all, and you've actually made a choice to be the passive receiver of whatever comes your way. Then page 20, your biggest challenge in life isn't that you've intentionally been making bad choices. Heck, that would be an easy fix. Your biggest challenge is that you've been sleepwalking through your choices. Then on 21, nobody intends to become obese or go bankrupt or get a divorce, but often, if not always, those consequences are the result of a series of small poor choices. And then a bit further down, for most of us, it's the frequent small and insignificant and seemingly inconsequential choices that are of grave concern. And then going to page 24, and this is where he talks about, there's a little sort of title that says owning 100%. So he says, I was 18 when I was introduced to the idea of personal responsibility at a seminar. In that seminar I attended at 18, the speaker asked, what percentage of shared responsibility do you have in making a relationship work? Then he gives a whole bunch of different answers. People say 50-50, one says 40-50, 41, 49, and then another 80-20, and a bunch of different answers. So the instructor wrote 100/0 on the paper in big black letters. And the instructor's words were, you have to be willing to give 100% with zero expectation of receiving anything in return. Only when you're willing to take 100% of the responsibility for making the relationship work will it work. Otherwise, a relationship left to chance will always be vulnerable to disaster. And then a bit further down, he says, I know you think you take responsibility for your life, yet I've yet to ask anyone who doesn't say, of course I take responsibility for my life. But then you look at how most people operate in the world. There's a lot of finger pointing, victimhood, blaming, and expecting someone else or the government to solve their problems. Yeah, and then the next piece of it he goes on to is, so that's the 100% ownership part. And then he talks about getting lucky, and he gives this formula for getting lucky. And there's 4 pieces to the formula. The one is preparation. So that's consistent self-improvement. And then the next is attitude. And the third is opportunity. And the fourth and last one is action. So preparation, attitude, opportunity, action. That's what he says results in luck. And preparation, so just to sort of give a high-level summary of them, preparation would be consistently improving and preparing yourself. Then attitude is basically what you are. It's like, do you have a positive mindset and things like that? Because you can't see what you don't look for. And then opportunity is just that in general, things, just as you're going through life, different opportunities present themselves, and are you sort of looking out for them and able to take them, I guess in part because of your attitude. And then action, like, are you taking action on the things that come across or the opportunities that come your way. And those 4 different things are what luck is made out of, is in Darren's view. Cool. Then the last part is going to page 30. If you want to get from where you are now to where you want to be, you have to start with becoming aware of the choices that lead you away from your desired destination. And then a bit further down, I want you to track every action that relates to the area of your life that you want to improve. And then a bit further, it doesn't sound like much, I know, writing things down on a little piece of paper, but tracking my progress and missteps is one of the reasons I've accumulated the success that I have. The magic is not in the complexity of the task. The magic is in doing the simple things repeatedly and long enough to ignite the miracle of the compound effect. The biggest difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is that successful people are willing to do what unsuccessful people are not. And then on page 32, tracking is my go-to transformation model for everything that ails me. Yeah, so that's the notes that I had for that chapter. And I think, it just basically reflects nicely on the choices that we make matter. And you should basically view it like you need to take 100% responsibility for the things, and that will help. And hopefully, like in the marriage example, hopefully you take 100% and your partner takes 100%. That'll be lovely. But even if they don't, you should still try and take 100%, because that's what's, as you kind of said earlier, Peter, that's what's in your control.
I was about to sneak it in there. I was like, hence, you're in control.
I'm on the same page as you, I think. Yeah.
Just, I'm just joking. No, I think just to add to what you're saying, like, I think for me, what also stood out is about us sleepwalking through our choices. I think that I think I've been highlighted that, and I mean there were examples again. It's like the whole thing of we subconsciously have like this stream of information coming at us, and the moment that you sort of give it a certain topic, a thought, it seems as if that keeps popping up, but no, it's only because you've started thinking about it. I mean, there was an example, probably it was in this book, about the whole, you always feel like you see a certain car when let's say if you're deciding to buy a car, you're like, a red something, and all of a sudden you're seeing this red. It's not that there's been an influx of that color car, it's just that just because you've been thinking about something in that region, then you end up seeing it more because you're paying attention to that. So I think that was quite interesting to be like, and I mean, he said it a few times, to be like, there are so many things that our brains just naturally do because we've done it over 1,000 times. And I mean, that's actually where, like, what makes it difficult to break a habit, because it's not work anymore. But even though it's not work, when you initially started doing this thing, you were fighting against the grain up until that point. And that's what your choices need to. You have to actively choose to do something to better your life, and only when you've done that a million times does it then become easy, No,
I think that actually ties really nicely into the next section, because the next part is habits, and the thing that he starts off with there is like how basically some habits are just really hard to break, And he gives the illustration of I think it's the sapling. So you give a small little initial plant that's like just been started to grow and that. And there's a person who's like, okay, try and pull that out. And then the person tries to pull it out and it's super easy to pull out because it's barely grown at all. Then you go on to a little bit later and you try and pull out a bigger, like more established plant, and it's difficult to pull out, but it's still like fairly doable. And then you try and pull out an oak tree, like a full grown oak tree, and it's just like so almost impossibly difficult to pull out because the roots are so established. And it is possible maybe with some machinery and things, but the thing is you want to form good habits that have roots like the oak tree, and you want to get rid of the bad habits as early as you can, because the longer they go on for, the more established they will be. It's not to say that they aren't overcomable, but you need to then realize that if they are long established habits, they will most likely be a lot harder to break because their roots are a lot more grounded. And so be willing to put in the work for that as well. Yeah. And then he gives a quote here on page 52, which effectively is quoting what Aristotle wrote. Not exactly, but basically quoting what he wrote. We are what we repeatedly do. So, yeah. Cool. Should I dig into the other parts of
Yes, you may.
chapter 3? Okay, so habits. Page 53. A daily routine built on good habits is the difference that separates the most successful amongst us from everyone else. And then on page 55, he says, he's got the title, Start by thinking your way out of the instant gratification trap. So he says here, we are a rational species. At least that's what we tell ourselves. So why are we so irrationally enslaved by so many bad habits? It's because our need for immediate gratification can turn us into the most reactive, non-thinking animals around. Then a bit further down, the problem is that the payoff or instant gratification derived from bad habits often far outweighs what's going on in our rational mind concerning long-term consequences. Yeah. Then on page 58, says here, the most motivating of choices are ones aligned with that which we identify as our purpose, your core self, your highest values. You've got to want something and know why. And that he sort of emphasizes that word, why you want it, or you'll end up giving up too easily. So what is your why? Then on the next page, the power of your why is what gets you to stick through the grueling, the mundane, the laborious. And then on the next page, page 60, he gives an illustration of these two buildings, and between them is a plank. And he says, like, okay, you offered a bunch of money to walk across the plank. Would you do it? And then basically the answer is no, you wouldn't sacrifice or risk your life for to get some money. But if your child was on the other side and the building was burning in that, then you would risk it because you want to save your child. And so the core idea there is that if your why is strong enough, you'll figure out how to do it and you'll go for it. But if you don't have a strong why, you'll probably lose motivation to do that thing. Then on page 61, he says, the access point to your why power is through your core values, which define both who you are and what you stand for. Your core values are your inner compass. And then page 62, when faced with the choice, ask yourself, does this align with my core values? If it does, do it. If it does not, don't do it, and don't look back. All fretting and indecision are eliminated. Then page 68. So 66. He says, and this is kind of about like goals and how he views goals working. And this touches on the point that you were talking about, Peter, with the car, and like when you see the car and you notice the car. So he says, when you instruct your brain to look for things you want, you will begin to see them. And then he kind of talks about how like just general brain things work, where if you set your mind on something, then you will become more aware of it, like the car example. But if you don't, then you won't. And so he's essentially saying, focus on the things you want to. That's kind of one of the key things of goals, setting goals. And then 68, he says, okay, so I have my goal. Now what do I need to do? And then he says, the question we should be asking ourselves is rather, who do I need to become? And then a little bit further down, Jim Rohn taught me, which Jim Rohn is a person that he often mentions as his mentor, one of the people who taught him a lot of the stuff that he knows. He says here that Jim says, if you want to have more, you have to become more. Success is not something you pursue. What you pursue will elude you. It can be like trying to chase butterflies. Success is something that you attract by the person that you become, which I think is related to the stuff you were talking about right at the beginning. And then jumping to page 74, he says he gives 5 strategies for eliminating bad habits, and then he'll give 5 strategies for installing good habits. So I'll run through them super quickly. So one of the 5 for eliminating bad habits is identify your triggers. So figure out the who, the what, the where, and the when. And then the second thing he suggests is clean the house. And he says, I mean literally and figuratively. If you want to stop watching so much television at night, cancel your cable, your Netflix, and other subscription services. Get rid of whatever enables your bad habits. Then another suggestion he has is swap it out. Look again at the list of bad habits and how can you alter them so that they're not as harmful? Can you replace them with healthier habits? Then the 4th suggestion he gives is to ease in. So for some of your long-standing and deep-rooted habits, it may be more effective to take small steps to ease into unwinding them. And then 5th is kind of almost the opposite thing. He says jump in. Not everyone is wired the same way. Some researchers have found that it can be paradoxically easier for people to make massive lifestyle changes when they change many habits at once. Personally, I find this to be the exception to the rule, but you'll have to figure out what strategy works best for you. So, yeah, those are his thoughts. And then 6 techniques for installing good habits. And then on page 82, he says, the first one, set yourself up to succeed. And he says, any new habit has to work inside of your existing lifestyle or life and lifestyle. And then the next is, he said, think addition, not subtraction. So instead of thinking that this is an example or explanation that he gives, instead of thinking that he has to deprive himself or take something out of his diet, he thinks about what he can have instead. He fills his focus and his belly with what he can have, so he no longer has tension or hunger for what he can't have. And then on page 84, he says, public display of accountability. So once one puts out there on the public record, once one puts something out there on the public record, one knows that they'll be held responsible. I think I have some caveats to that one, but I'll leave them for now. Then find a success buddy. There are few things as powerful as 2 people locked arm in arm marching towards the same goal. For example, I have what I call a peak performance partner. Every Friday at 11 a.m. sharp, we have a 30-minute call during which we trade our wins, losses, fixes, ahas and solicit the needed feedback and hold each other accountable. You might seek a success buddy for regular walks, runs, dates to the gym, or meet to discuss personal finance development books. Personal development books. And then 5, he says competition and camaraderie. There's nothing like a friendly contest to whet your competitive spirit and immerse yourself in a new habit. And then 6, he says celebrate. There should be time to celebrate and enjoy some of the fruits of your victories along the way. And then sort of wrapping up, he says, there's one thing that 99% of failures and successful folks have in common. They all hate doing the same things. The difference is that successful people do them anyway. And then 88, he says, personally, I'm always happy when something is hard. Why? Because I know that most people won't do what it takes. I love what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said so eloquently. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge. Then a bit further down, science shows that many patterns of thoughts and actions repeated create what's called a neurosignature or a brain groove. Then a bit further down, if we stop giving attention to bad habits, those grooves weaken. When we form new habits, we drive new grooves deeper with each repetition. Creating new habits, burning new grooves into your brain will take time, so be patient with yourself. Yeah, that's the chapter on habits. I know that there was a lot of things that we ran through there, but
Yeah.
if you have any.
Yeah, I mean, it was, like I said, it's probably one of the longest chapters. I mean, that whole 1 degree deviation is from this chapter. But yeah, the one thing that I wanted to touch on again, I know you spoke about it, was the why power. I think I did find it interesting how, walking across a plank, on the ground, and when it's like a few stories high is different, but you give someone the right reason to do it, then they'll do it. I felt like that was very interesting, and I think it's what us as human beings need to, I mean, for instance, when you want to change your lifestyle, let's say eat more healthy, when I think it's something we always say up until, when you're given, I know it's not supposed to be like that, but when someone gets a health scare, then all of a sudden they want to be the healthiest person, But again, the why
That's
then is greater, I mean, I myself am guilty for that, where something will roll along and you're like, okay, I think now I need to take this a little more seriously. But yeah, that applies to everything else. Like we said in the previous chapter, we are sleepwalking through our choices. It's how habits creep in. We are doing things because they are appealing at the time, and as time go by, we do them without knowing, but not actually taking account of what the consequences of those things are. And I mean, there were the 5 points of trying to get rid of a habit. I mean, you went through that. I don't think I have anything to add. But I know with 6 techniques of trying to pick up a habit, you said you had something about the whole public display of accountability. I'd like to hear what your thought was.
So on that one, so that's for installing good habits. I think that it's the public display of accountability. I've always struggled with whether it's a good idea or not, because at one point I heard this concept and it rang true, which is that if you want to do something, then just do it. Don't announce it to the world, because what will happen is if you announce it to the world and you announce to everyone like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this thing, I'm gonna do this thing, I'm gonna do this thing, then you're basically getting the satisfaction of doing the thing from the telling other people that you're gonna do it. And then there's not really much motivation to actually do it. Now, obviously, there's the flip side of that where it's like, okay, if you tell someone that you're going to do it and then you don't do it, you're like, ooh, like I didn't do the thing that I said I was going to do. And I guess it probably comes down to a situational awareness thing. Like, if you tell someone that you're going to do something and that person's like an extremely important person to you, that like you don't just like tell them, oh yeah, I'm going to try this or I'm going to try that, and then you never do it, then it's maybe it is a good thing. But I think his example is actually ironic because his example in the book is, picture any politician taking an oath in the office. I solemnly swear, and then comes the speech on how they'll turn their campaign promises into boots on the ground realities. Once they put it on the public record, they know they'll be held responsible for any action that rolls back on their promises or praise for any progress towards their goals. So the example that he gives is basically the politician making promises, and then those promises now the politician needs to hold themselves or is now held accountable by the public. But I think most of us know that a lot of the time those promises end up being false promises, for various reasons, good and bad. Like sometimes it's just like a marketing tactic to get people to vote you into power so that you can actually make good progress on things. But sometimes it's just, yeah, you have no intention of doing them. And so I think I find it to be an ironic example. But the main point that I'm making is that like I don't think it's quite as simple as like public displays of accountability are good for instilling new habits. I think it's like with a lot of things a little bit more nuanced than that.
But okay, so interesting enough, like I share the same thing. Okay, this is like not now on a personal. I wouldn't do that, like to like the public display of accountability. But I think, and I mean, I think I remember also, and it wasn't also on accountability. It was just the whole other people take joy in saying they'll do something and not actually do it, or them saying something along those lines in their head, it registers as if they've done it without the action, you know. So I get all that, but so where I'm coming at with that is like I also think it's on how you do it. You know, for instance, I think the follow-up example of how he then told everyone, and again, I think he was also talking about from the point of view that it might not actually you being the one saying it out, but you know how the lady shared with him that she wanted to quit smoking, and then he then ended up telling the whole office that she wanted to quit. Then everyone kind of kept an eye, and they were looking forward to her crossing off the date and everything. Yes, as much as, again, I think just like anything else, if she slipped back, a lot of people would then be disappointed. But I think also it's also in having that support that actually can help you get through those kind of situations. So I think it's an either or type of thing, depending on how great you want it. Because I think I think it is important sometimes to have like, I mean, now, like, again, like I said, I'm trying to be a lot more active, go back to gym and whatnot, and like, you know, I mean, I cannot go to a gym for a week and not say anything to anyone, and that's okay, you know. But there are those times where I'll tell my friend, like, oh, I'm struggling with this, and like, you know, there'll be some random mornings where they'll just be like, did you go to gym today? It's not like it just helps, you know, to be like, okay, I think I need to get my act together and actually do this. So I mean, it's the same thing as with that as well. It's what you then identify as, like when you tell someone that I want to stop, and we're using the smoking example, but you know, when I think we read it. I don't know if it was Atomic Habits or another book we read where you need to actually rewire your brain on how you think about certain things. If you're trying to quit a certain habit, you then don't need to identify as belonging to a group that does that. So, for instance, the smoker one, if you're trying to quit, try to not refer to you as a smoker anymore. Because the moment you say I'm a smoker trying to quit, you're still, attaching yourself to that group of being a smoker, which unfortunately isn't helpful because you then default by I'm a smoker anyways, I'll carry on. But that I just wanted to hear your take on that. But I also fully agree that some people just say that for the sake of saying it and not actually follow through with their plans. But and I mean the success buddy one, I think that's also very important. I mean,
I think that's more important to me than the success buddy thing is almost conceptually the public. It's the same to me. It's the same principle as the public thing, where if you can say the public thing and you know that that's what's going to hold you accountable, then it works as the same thing. But to me, the success buddy idea is a little bit more reliable as a thing. If you and I are going to go to gym, and both of us are let's agree to meet tomorrow at 6 a.m. If one of us doesn't show up, the other one's gonna be like, "Where are you, man? We said we were gonna be there. You're not here. Why?" And then you have to explain, no, but I didn't feel like it. And then you'll be like, "Nah, that's not a good excuse. I'll just let me go." So that, to me, I think is a bit more reliable than the public display one. Yeah. There was one other thing, which is when speaking about the why idea and the core values and things, I really liked the part where he said on page 62, when faced with a choice, ask yourself, does this align with my core values? If it does, do it. If not, don't, and don't look back. All fretting and indecision are eliminated. Because sort of right at the beginning of the book, it talks about not doing 5,000, or Tony at least talks about not doing 5,000 things, but rather doing a few things 5,000 times over. And I think that kind of helps with that, saying what really are the things that are important for me, and choosing to do those, not the other things. I've used the example in the past, probably on the podcast, but for me, I really wanted to be good at piano, and I used to really whenever I saw someone playing piano, I was like, I really want to be able to do that. And try and hey,
I'm saying
have I not used?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well then I'll tell it. So I used to always want to, and then I would go through phases of looking for pianos and what makes a really good piano and the weighted keys on a piano and buying an expensive piano and wanting to do those kind of things. I didn't ever buy the piano because about 4 or so, when I was younger, I got one of those cheapish digital pianos, which was nice at the time, and I did some random things with it. But then as I got older, I was like, I really want to get good at piano again. But it was this sort of ebb and flow thing of every now and again, kind of like a lot of people are with guitar, they just want to learn to play guitar and things. And then a couple years back, I realized it's actually not something that I really want to do. I would really like to be able to be good at piano if I could just snap my fingers and do it. But the practical reality of okay, I have to practice every other day for a long time and invest a lot of time and things like that, that wasn't something I was interested in. I just wanted the result at the end, so that basically, for lack of a better phrase, I wanted to be able to impress people with my piano skills. I didn't actually care about the playing piano, even though I'd tell myself I did, and maybe some level I did. But I think if I really assess what I was looking for, that's probably more it, because whenever I would watch someone playing piano, I was like, I would love to be able to play piano like that. I didn't just enjoy it for what it was. And now a couple years later, after I like kind of made that decision of like, okay, I'm going to choose to not do the thing, not because it doesn't align with my core values or whatever, but just because I'm like, that's not, I feel like there's other things that I'd rather focus on and just let that go so that now I can just enjoy people playing piano. Now I can actually sit and appreciate them because I'm not like envious of the fact that I can't do that yet. I'm just like, that's not something I'm going to do. And that's fine. I can do other things and try and be good at other things.
Yeah.
And I can just enjoy other people's talents with pianos or guitar or whatever the instrument is. And yeah, so that was the story. But yeah, so trying to use the like, what are the things that are important to you to eliminate and choose those like top priorities and focus on those, and doing those, I think, is a helpful thing. All right, momentum. So that's the next chapter. What he calls Big Mo.
Mo.
I always laugh when I read it. So momentum. I'll read through a bunch of snippets again. So page 92. The law of inertia. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest unless acted on by an outside force. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. And then he says on 93, adopting any change is the same way. You get started by taking one small step, one action at a time. Progress is slow, but once a newly formed habit kicks in, Big Mo joins the party. Then going to page 97. He's got the title Routine Power, or a different way of saying it is routines for momentum. And then he says here, some of our best intentions fail because we don't have a system of execution. These routines ease life's stresses by making our actions automatic and effective. Or he talks about a bunch of other things, and then he says, like, basically routines are important. And then he says these routines ease life stresses by making our actions automatic and effective. To reach new goals and develop new habits, it's necessary to create new routines to support your objectives. Or to phrase it differently, James Clear would say like new systems for, or I think that's what he would do. Then going to page 100. I'm not going to read through it, but on page 100, he says he's got this idea of bookending your days. So having a starting your day routine and having an ending your day routine. And the ending your day routine kind of reminds me of Cal Newport's shutdown routine. But just, it's not exactly the same and things like that, but just the way that like it brought that to my mind. He talks about the importance of having those routines. And then he talks about how you have professional sports people and things like that have routines of like whenever they're going to shoot for the hoop, they'll bounce the ball 5 times or they'll step backwards once, or I don't know, whatever their routine is. And that's like sort of...
No, I was just saying it's also like the one golfer he said would like do the whole dance some wiggle before he takes a shot, and
exactly.
That's just part of the routine.
Yeah, and it's kind of a process for getting your mind to click into the right mode. So it's it's almost like the I would assume lunch break for a smoker. Lunch break is like the trigger for smoking.
Okay.
Because now I'm gonna, it's like without even thinking about am I gonna do something or not, it's just that's what's gonna happen. And that like sort of ritualistic routine helps your mind sort of click into the thing that you want, or hopefully don't want, but the thing that if you've sort of built up good routines and things, then it helps you to click into that. And as Stephen Pressfield says, that idea of if you're a writer or something, then the quote, I can't remember who it's from, but
Yeah.
basically, inspiration strikes at
Inspiration
9 o'clock
hits
every month.
every
Yeah,
every day at times. Yeah.
yeah, every day at the same time. Yeah. So anyway, sorry. Carry on page 108. The title is "The Rhythms of Life." When people get started in a new endeavor, they almost always overdo it. You need to find a program that you can absolutely, positively do in the long term without renegotiation. I want you to think about what you can do for the rest of your life. And then 110, you can always find 45 minutes to an hour a few times a week, but to find 2 hours 5 days a week to make a routine work, that will never happen. Remember, consistency is a critical component of success. And then 114, winning the race is all about pace. Be the tortoise, the person who, given enough time, will beat virtually anybody at any competition as a result of positive habits and behaviors applied consistently. Yeah, momentum is important.
Yeah. I think for that chapter, I think you didn't. I just some of my takeaway from it. There was a whole start your day, bookend your day type stuff. But there was the shake it up part as well.
Yeah.
I feel like was also quite interesting to be like. I think so often, and again, the more you look at it, I always think as if it's an excuse as well. People who are like, "Oh, I get bored easily," yada yada yada. It's like we all don't like doing this thing, but it's like an easy thing to say this is why I stopped doing this. But again, you're not doing yourself justice.
Yeah.
But I think for me, what was important was also his description of, again, like Big Mo being like, of this in comparison with the steam engine. How like it will take a lot to get it going, but once it's going, it holds that
Yeah.
momentum. So yeah, I thought that was very important. That I think it's again, I think we always call it like that mental battle, that mental barrier. That like in the beginning of everything, it will really be hard to sort of combat that. But I think once you breach that or you break that, it's easier. I think registering your rhythm. I think that's also important. I think it's just important to. And I think I felt when he said that that's the same as the tracking, whatever it is that you track, I think, is quite
Yeah.
important, and there was a whole power of consistency, again, like the STEM engine, it's like, yeah, the more you're consistent at something, I think it becomes second nature, think about the book we read, How We Think, it talks about how, you know, when you do something or certain actions, that neural pathway is always used to the point where there's literally no resistance through that to make something easier to do. I feel
Yeah.
like habits like that is also well as creating, a habit. And then you have the pump or that's, I don't know if you've ever used one before, but I think, that's very interesting. Like again, you go at it for a while before water starts coming out. But once the water starts coming out, like every single pump or every, I know there was a term he used, which I was like, oh, is that actually a term he used? But yeah, every single pump you sort of do, water will flow. But the moment you stop for a while, the water drops all the way back to the bottom. Then you kind of have to start everything again. And again, it goes
Yeah.
back to what I said now, to be like, I built the momentum of my routine when I was fit, but now, like, it took me probably 3 months to kind of start seeing results and start seeing, that, okay, it's paying off.
Yeah.
But if I'd carried on, it's like, it would have been just being maintained every single day. Probably won't see any change, but at least I know that I feel good and I feel fit and stuff. So yeah, I think big more. As funny as you said that term is, it's quite important to keep the momentum. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean,
No, I think it's
going back to the whole Newton's law, it's like either you're in motion or at a standstill, but when you're in motion, it's like you carry on going until you're compelled otherwise.
yeah. No, it's definitely a helpful analogy, which is why it keeps getting reused, but it's not
Yeah.
necessarily a bad thing.
Mm.
All right, should we go on to chapter 5, influences? Okay, so there's quite a few little snippets that I'll read through now. Starting on page 117. So, influences. Hopefully by now you understand exactly how important your choices are. We've also discussed the fact that you are 100% responsible for your life. That said, you must also realize your choices, behaviors, and habits are influenced by very powerful external forces. And then he says, everyone is affected by 3 kinds of influences. And then he lists them out. The first is input, which is kind of what you put into your mind, what you feed your mind, so input. The second is association, so the people that you spend time with, what you associate with. Then the third is environment, so what you surround yourself, the environment that you surround yourself with. So those 3, then he digs a little bit into them. So on page 118, input, garbage in, garbage out. So he says, be vigilant about consuming the highest quality nutrient, or people are normally quite vigilant when they want to have a peak performance body or something. Then he says, people are vigilant about consuming the highest quality nutrients and avoiding tempting junk food. And then he says, are you feeding it consistently with your mind? Are you feeding it consistently with negative news or mind-numbing TV shows? Are you stuffing your head full of BuzzFeed gossip, insane social media, or TikTok videos? Or inane, sorry, not insane. And then a little bit further down, although it's true that we eat without thinking, it's easier to pay attention to what we put in our bodies because food doesn't leap into our mouths. We need an extra layer of vigilance to prevent our brains from absorbing irrelevant, counterproductive, or downright destructive input. And then going on to 123, says it's estimated that Americans 12 and older spend 1,704 hours watching TV per year. That averages out to 4.7 hours per day. We're spending almost 30% of our waking hours watching TV. Then a bit further, he says, put yourself on a media diet. The media thrives on taking us hostage. Even if we're adept to avoiding negativity and have trained ourselves to be relentlessly positive, when it comes to sensationalism, our basic nature can't resist. A bit further down, being wired to seek out the negative, we create the demand for more and more. And then he says, the great danger of the media is that it gives us a very perverted view of the world, because the focus and repetition of messages is on the negative. That's what our minds start believing. This warped and narrowed view of what's not working has a severe influence on our creative potential. It can be crippling. Then a bit further, this is now the next piece. So that's talking about inputs, and now this piece is about associations. And he says, who is influencing you? Birds of a feather flock together. The people with whom you habitually associate are called your reference group, according to research by social psychologist Dr. David McClelland of Harvard University, or of Harvard. Your reference group determines as much as 95% of your success or failure in life. But further down, Rohn would say, we could tell the quality of your health, attitude, and income by looking at the people around us. The people with whom we spend our time determine what conversations dominate our attention. along with the attitudes and opinions we're regularly exposed to. Then on 126, meanwhile, or friends order there's like sort of two groups. The friends who order healthy food and talk about inspiring books they're reading and their goals for business and aspirations, you soon begin to assimilate their behaviors and habits. And then there's the other group, which he says, for example, might order greasy appetizers and have a cocktail before dinner, and that's their routine. And if you hang out with them enough, you'll find yourself grabbing for cheese nachos and potato skins. And then he says a bit further down, watch out. You cannot hang out with negative people and expect to live a positive life. And then, carrying on to 130, I've spent more than 1,000 hours getting direct instruction from Jim, and 99% of that was through books and audio programs. You too can have almost any mentor you want, if he or she has gathered their best thoughts, stories, ideas, and books into videos or podcasts. And that's the idea that he gives of expanding, because he touches on three different things which I kind of glanced over, which is for these associations, there's different ways you can handle them. The one is to disassociate, to stop associating with people. Mm-hmm. The other is to limit, which is to you still associate with someone or something, but just not as much. So you limit the time essentially. And then the other is to expand your association. So obviously to try and invest more time with spending time with people that have good practices and you view as mentors or something like that. So those are the three different things. And then when he talks about expanding associations, he talks about it in different ways. But one of the ways that he talks about is what I just read there, which is doing it through not even necessarily people that are physically there, although that's a good thing to do, but even with books like self-help books or books from history, like the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius is a common one that people do, from Stoic philosophy, and basically spending time in quotes with those figures of history can help a lot. And then lastly, on 134, he talks about environment. Changing your view changes your perspective. And then he says here, I lived and worked within a very limited demographic. I saw the same kinds of people operating at the same level over and over. I needed to find an elevated circle of associations in order to go where I wanted to go. And then he talks about his dream house and a few different things, but I think the general idea of environment and saying your environment is important to cultivate correctly, and it has a big shape on the way that you do things. It's kind of like the classic Silicon Valley thing, where it's like a lot of innovation and things like that happens in Silicon Valley, not because Silicon Valley is necessarily special in any way. I mean, people that are there would probably say that it is, and in some sense it's true, but it's because of the people that are there, that attracts people that have that same. They're like, I want to do something, achieve something, and more people go there, and then there ends up being a collection of people that are striving towards doing something. And if you spend time with runners, then you will probably end up becoming a runner, etc., etc. So what are your thoughts on influences, Peter?
I mean, I think one of my comments of the book was on that, about the whole, it's not only about the summation of your character, or your character is the summation of the five people around you, But again, like you said, I think what stood out for me was the whole expanding your association bit, where you actually how you seek out. I actually wanted to ask you, like, after, like, what your take is on what he said on the whole, you know, even listening contact to the people you look up to as being a form of mentorship.
I think it's true, and I think it's good as long as you don't treat it as a substitute for human interaction. Like I think it's really valuable to spend time with other people's thoughts, because like, I mean, many people have said this in different ways, but basically, like, if you think about books, especially books more than I would say podcasts and that, because I think podcasts often can end up being just ramblings of thoughts and stuff. Even ours to some degree, like, can be like that. But a book is much more of a curated thing normally, not always, but normally it's something where someone has invested a bunch of time putting it together, and then other people, editors and that, have gone and went through it, and then people have fact checked it and things like that. And so, sure, things can creep through that aren't correct and etc. But on the whole, I think it's often books are like very distilled forms of people's wisdom. And then it's even more so with historical books. So the example of the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, that kind of a book I think is even more valuable to read. I don't read that many of those kinds of books, but I think that those kind of books are probably even more valuable to read because it is again the same sort of idea. It's like refined knowledge. I mean, it's ironic. The Meditations one is maybe slightly different to that, although I don't know if I fully believe that it wasn't intended for publication. So it's supposed to be a journal of his thoughts and stuff like that, published later on. But like in general, a book from history is one that's both stood the test of time. Like a bunch of people have come before you, read through it and been like, this was actually, I found this helpful. And so it's that, and then it's the condensed form of their wisdom normally. Not the totality of their wisdom, but yeah. And so I think to me, it seems obvious that must be true. But what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I read that and it kind of was something that I was like, I need to give it some thought. Again, I think maybe it's just also how he presented it to be like, listen to the material that's out there from this person, be it podcast, and I mean, I also share probably the same sentiment that you have about podcasts, where it not always is. It's not purely what people are thinking. I mean, and moreover, if it's like two people, then you have like if opposing views there, so it kind of is a little distractive. You as much as it's a wealth of knowledge, you can also get very. You still need to also implement some sort of filter in it, unlike a book where it's like you said, it was written covering a specific topic. The time has been put into it. It's been edited, so you know that the information there is strictly on that subject matter. And again,
more likely to be, yeah.
Yeah, more likely to be on one subject matter, and again, it's been researched, etc., etc. But yeah, I think it was just rather, let me say it was something that I'd never considered, or I've never given it that thought to be like, because, and the reason why I asked that, like, weirdly enough, I'm in that stage where could be wrong, but it's just something I've been thinking through to be like, I want like a mentor, like be it career and all that. But then it's that thing of where it's like, I mean, it's probably been like a year now, a few months, maybe even longer than a year of me thinking about like I just now it's a matter of who do I pick, and how
Yeah.
do I go through it and all that kind of stuff. And like when I read that, I was like, interesting that I've never thought about, but also I'm like, do I really agree with that being an approach of it? Because again, maybe I also maybe that human interaction is also maybe key for me. Maybe that could be another aspect where looking at that to me
Yeah.
was like maybe that this is not for me and why I'm being dismissive about it. But it's not like dismissive for me, but not that it actually doesn't work. That's why I was asking like what's actually your thought on it or your take on it. So yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if
But
that
that's
makes sense or I
that's
just rambling.
no, I think it makes a lot of sense. And that's why I think I was saying where as long as you don't use it as a substitute, because I think that a book, as much as even a book like this especially, can push back on you and be like, are you really taking 100% ownership of the things that you're doing, and those kinds of ideas? Like it can push back on you, but it's different to having someone that's actually there. It's kind of like a personal trainer where you can go and watch a video and then you can follow along with the video, and that's good. But it's not actually a person. Maybe it's a recorded person, but it's not actually a physical person that's there that can interact with you and be like, you're
I
not
was gonna
really
say that.
doing the like thing that we were speaking about, or like you can push a little bit further. I know you can. Like there's not that form of interaction,
There's no
but
feedback essentially.
yeah, but it doesn't mean that the following a fitness video and doing the fitness there's anything wrong with that. In fact, it can be really good, and in fact, you can get some of the highest quality fitness training advice from videos that people have put up by like expert coaches, and maybe your trainer, your like local trainer, is good. Maybe they average it, but that even if they were average, it's better than nothing.
Nothing.
So yeah, I think to me it seems like there's kind of a mixture of things that are healthy. Like I think it's good to have that what did he call it? Success buddy. Like in some sense what you and I are to each other for the podcast. Like we try and hold each other accountable to read the books and try and do it once a month, and then we try and speak about it together. And like that I think is a very healthy thing, and it's not quite a mentorship thing, but I think it's an element that it's very important.
No, I mean it's going back to what you it's. This is probably similar to what we can say, Jim to the third. Like we all felt that we needed to read more, but it was like okay, it's a habit we want to pick up, but it's the whole accountability buddy as well. Like we're talking about it, this kind of serves as that because come at the end of the month, we not that like we get reprimanded for it or that, but it's like we all want together to be like we've actually taken the time to actually read it and actually know what's going on, and
Yeah.
that's but yeah, sorry to have cut you
Yeah.
there.
No worries. I think that's the one piece of it. Then another piece of it I'd say is the like having an actual mentor, which I think I'm on a similar page ironically in life as you. I would like to have some sort of a mentor. And I don't know how many or not, because I mean the one person's like, yeah, I have 24 mentors or something, one for this part and one for that part. And I think
Yeah, I
that's
think it was in this book as well. It was about have as many
yeah.
coaches as you are in the different. Yeah, I was also like,
Yeah. And I think that there's an element of like helpfulness there, because it's like, okay, like it is, if you think about, let's say you're writing a book, if you consider the editor as some sort of a mentor coach thing, then fine. I think it's good to have a mentor coach in that way, even though most people wouldn't call them a mentor coach person. And it's the same true for the gym instructor, where they're like the personal trainer. Like you can view them as a mentor person in that sort of sphere of your life and things. So, but however you want to view that, I think it's good to have a accountability thing, it's good to have the person that's actually mentoring you, like your, let's say in theory, your boss. If they're a good boss, like maybe you can, even though you might never say to them, you are my mentor, then it might be a relationship that you view like that. And you're like, I appreciate this person's insight into things and the way that they approach things, and I want to learn from them. But then I think if you only have those two things, I think you're lacking there's a wealth of knowledge and stuff like that, which people over time have sifted through and sort of chosen, and books are classics for a reason often, even though sometimes that reason is fairly elusive. I was speaking to a friend as well about the idea of Shakespeare and that, and why I have a theory. I haven't actually researched it, but the theory is that the reason why Shakespeare is so like popular in schools or just as a general like classic work of literature is because often his plays and writing and that is, the literary style is one thing, and that's normally what people speak about. But I think the sort of more important thing is that often they're retellings of old Greek myths. And so he's sort of pulling on a lot of like Greek myths and biblical ideas and different things. And that's what gives a lot of his writing a lot of like depth and meaning and stuff, because he's pulling on these sort of there's like standard human themes.
Experiences.
Yeah, but then we're not really taught that stuff in school, or at least I wasn't, that I know of. Maybe my teachers were really good and I wasn't paying attention. That is a highly likely possibility. But yeah, so we end up in this situation where there's a lot of these classics that have a lot of depth and meaning to them, and we can miss out on that as well. But you can also miss out on the human interaction if you only just get lost in books. And so yeah, but it's Aristotle's golden mean is the classic that it comes back to. Yeah, I don't know if you have any last thoughts on...
No, I mean that was pretty much me. We were going through my last thoughts when it kind of sort of
yeah, I know
took us to different, which I feel like I've done a lot of today.
No, I think it's good. That's very good. It also makes me... I was thinking now, like, if people get caught up, let's say that someone's listening to the podcast and they like end up listening to a section like this, I think it's helpful to realize that like going and reading the book and creating your own podcast or doing your own thing like little book club or something is probably better to do than listening to this podcast. You'll probably get more out of it than that. Not that, or I hope people get something out of this, but I think we are probably getting the most value that one can extract from it, because we are most involved with it, which I think naturally is going to be the case with anyone doing anything. If you are most involved in it, that's when you get the most value. If you're just a passive listener, it's not terrible. It's better than being a passive consumer of like things that are unhealthy or bad. But yeah, anyway, enough of influences. Chapter 6, acceleration. Okay, I'll run through the last little bits there, or the snippets from that chapter. So 39. There are very few things that you can do voluntarily that cause more pain and suffering than riding a bike up a steep mountain without stopping. There's a point at which you hit a wall and come face to face with your true inner character. And then he goes a bit further down. It's then when you're faced with one of life's greatest questions. Do you push through the pain and continue on, or will you crack like a walnut and give up? Then on 140 he says, when you've prepared and practiced and studied and consistently put in the required effort, sooner or later you'll be presented with your own moment of truth. In that moment you will define who you are and what you are becoming, It's in those moments where growth and improvement live. And then to page 143. It's not until situations are difficult when problems... It's not until situations are difficult, when problems come up and temptation is great, that you get to prove your worthiness for progress. As Jim Rohn would say, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. And then a bit further down, he talks about multiplying results. And he says simple decisions and behaviors will compound over time. Then on page 145, another way to multiply your results is pushing past what other people expect of you and doing more than enough. And he gives illustrations there of like when you're training in the gym and you do one or two more reps than you originally planned or that you thought you could do, when you sort of push past that wall, and how those small bits of pushing past the barrier that you thought you were hitting, those effects also compound. So it's not just the like doing consistent results that compound, but if you push a little bit extra, that also compounds. Just a caveat: be careful of pushing too far and burning yourself out, because that can also compound in a very bad way. And then
That's how you whispered that.
And then page 153. So he says here, in all areas of your life, look for the multiplier opportunities where you can go a little further, push yourself a little harder, last a little longer, and prepare a little better, and deliver a little bit more. Yeah, that's what I had for the acceleration chapter. I think that the main idea for me was that just pushing a little bit harder in a healthy, balanced way, because that too compounds. Yeah.
I was going to say, reading this, I don't know, there'll be time and time I will always have this thought. I don't know if you remember the propeller days. You know, at the times when you realize we've actually done quite a lot together in life, and it's like the most random of things. But anyway.
Yeah, it's good.
But the propeller days, I remember, was it Bev? But yeah, one of the ladies was... yes, this time. Funny enough, I don't have one anymore. I don't know whatever happened. Like, I think I took one home, like, back to Malawi, and I think I never brought it back. You know, but
No.
But yeah, she was kind of talking about how it's not about the finishing line. It's about I don't know if you ever remember that one thing we're doing, but it's about you need to aim for beyond the finish line. And I feel like this is like a version of that, to be like, yes, that's what you expected to do, but do a little more. Like, again, like your body or your gym routine says do 3 sets of 6 reps, and then either you add one more set after that, or instead of doing 6 reps, you do 8 or 10, you know, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think to me, like, you know, as you're saying, like that also then compounds. Not only are you doing something good that will compound its effect, but the more you push, the more you also compound the success of that thing, you know. I feel, that was really good. The one thing that also stood out to me in the acceleration part is like, be different, you know. Like, I think I was reading the advice he was giving his friend. I was like, that's actually like, I feel like if he had done that, he probably would have gotten the job, where he took it upon himself, actually fly there to have an in-person interview. Yes, the flip side is also, I think, going to be a huge loss if you don't get it. But I think it's just good to challenge ourselves, you know. There's always that whole thing of like for every 5 rejections or 5 struggles, there's at least one you might actually break through. I think there was also something about that mission. You know, but yeah, I think it is important to I think just nudge ourselves a little harder, once the momentum is going, not just focus on what the momentum is helping us carry through, but then just push a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah, I think kind of goes back to, I think, a somewhat common theme in the book is just like putting in the effort, and we are, I think, especially like our generation and the like generation after us, I think, are very almost sensitive to overworking and like extremely worried about burnout and those kinds of things. And I think that can be to the detriment of actually putting in that bit of extra effort. Yeah, so I think it's about trying to find that balance of like not pushing yourself like way too hard for way too long, but still like pushing yourself and trying to do that little bit extra and that. Yeah. Right. The conclusion section. So I just have 1 page worth of little notes here. So he says here on page 155, learning without execution is useless. The compound effect is a tool that, when combined with consistent positive action, will make a real and lasting difference in your life. Whenever you realize small, seemingly innocuous poor habits have crept back into your life, take out this book. Yeah. And that's it. The compound effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your, or do you have any last thoughts?
I think we rambled a little longer in the beginning. That it's like we back full circle because that's what you started with to say.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
loved how that ending was. But yeah, I think my last thoughts. I mean, I think we always say this every single time after our chat through the book is that if you can read the book, I don't think this is one of those that you can finish in this 2 hours sitting, but maybe an impressive read and can get through it in 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's
well, you can get the audiobook and then put it on 2 to 3 times speed, and then you should be good.
Yeah. I should say it was also I don't know. We have been reading quite a lot of hard books this year, or just books that have different writing styles. So I think it was great to read something from our time again.
Yeah, it was a nice
easy
like
read.
the style was very
Yeah.
easy to read. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. Again, like I said, like we said in the beginning, like I don't think a lot that was said in this is something that you've never heard before, but I think it's just a matter of putting it into practice. If there's anything that you feel is crippling you, a habit that you think is bad, start taking action into trying to weed that out, and the same as if there's something that you really, really, want in life, start working towards it. I mean, I always say with a friend, I'm terrible at like making, 5 year ago, 3 year ago, whatnot. But I think reading this book was like, maybe I should actually give it a try to like just give a lot more thought. I mean, but again, I mean, he said something quite interesting, which I don't know how I feel about it, but also maybe something worth trying to be like, if you don't write something down, it might actually be forgotten, and it's wasted effort if you just think about it and not pen it down. So maybe I think be a little intentional to write what it is that I want to work towards and actually maybe do it. And yeah, I have again, like I said, there was a lot of his short ads in there, but again, some of the things were interesting. Like try to sit down and write like what you think you need to cut out in your life and what is it that you want to pick up and actually, try to work towards it. Yeah. So I encourage you to grab a copy. Yeah, there's some golden nuggets. Again, like I said, probably reinforcing things that you already know. So do yourself a favor and read it. Yeah.
Yeah, from my side, I actually like, I wouldn't say pessimistic, but I was like going into this like, oh, this is going to be like a proper self-help book, like one of those like classic, bit cringy, motivational kind of self-help books. And I was pleasantly surprised, I will say. I wasn't like completely like, oh, it's not gonna, but especially when it, to be fair, I haven't really read any of Tony Robbins' stuff, but I think he seems like, stuff that I've glanced at, he seems like a pretty reasonable guy, and the stuff he says makes sense. But he's very well known in the like personal career growth, self-help type industry, there was a lot of things in the book which I really enjoyed, and I thought that they helpful views, like especially his approach to saying like, look, there's a bunch of things that are going to be pushed at you, like marketed towards you and stuff like that just aren't good for you, and that it's trying to manipulate you into doing things that he doesn't directly say this, but essentially make a bunch of other people money and make you worse off. But and I thought it touched on a lot of helpful concepts and things like that. Whether you have read a lot of these kind of books or not, I think there's a lot of helpful ideas and helpful reminders and that. And for me, I think I don't know about necessarily the goals and writing things down in the same way that you were mentioning, because I find myself often like writing little, not specifically goals, but more like ideas of, I want to do this thing and that thing, and they're never actually doing them. So I think my takeaway from this and other random things that I've been like reading and watching is more along the lines of actually trying to limit it. You also touched on a little bit, like trying to refine what are the things that you want to focus on, and then actually going for those things and trying to take small steps towards them, rather than sort of trying to bite off too much or things, and trying to actually take small positive steps. But overall, like you said, I really enjoyed it and I thought it was a good book. Yeah. So thanks, Peter.
Thanks, James.
Cool. Until next time. Cheers.
Cheers.